Engage your brain and enter the mind's eye. Your one-stop shop for politics to paranormal and everything in between. I'm your host, Brian Turnov, and you're listening to Z Talk Radio. We have another mind-blowing episode for you tonight on this May 26th edition. The one and only retired nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman joins us to send the mind's eye off into our annual summer break. We're going to talk about the very real possibility of interstellar travel today. Not tomorrow, not in 50 years, today. On top of that, we'll also discuss Stanton's upcoming presentation at next weekend's Contact in the Desert 2016, which, if you don't know by now, is the biggest, the best, and largest UFO conference in the US. It's held in Joshua Tree, California, location of one of the most famous UFO sightings, and also just happens to be a beautiful place. More info now at contactinthedesert.com. Deep space travel, extraterrestrial life, and contact experiences, all coming up with ufologist Stanton T. Friedman on the other side of this break. This is The Mind's Eye. Big news recently on the science and medical front. A surgical milestone was hit when U.S. doctors performed the first successful penis transplant. With the good comes the bad. The biggest brain study of murderers was recently done and concludes that people are born killers. More fascinating articles now at themindseyemedia.com. Stanton T. Friedman discusses the recently released X-Files by the CIA in just a matter of moments. This is The Mind's Eye. Big digital applause for the one and only Stanton T. Friedman, nuclear physicist and the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident. Stanton, I really can't tell you how much of an honor it is to have you on The Mind's Eye.
That's because I'm so old and you're glad to have a good old boy.
Well, you can learn a lot from those who have seen it all. I really respect the things that you've done in life, you know, the secrets that you pretty much won't let get covered up, the reputation that, in my opinion, you put on stake, talking about UFOs at a time when it was pretty much unheard of professionally. Now, I know this is like kind of a bit of an overused term these days, but did you ever consider yourself a bit of a whistleblower?
Well, whistleblower means you're talking about stuff you work on and so forth and revealing secrets you weren't supposed to release or information the company didn't want or something like that. So in a general sense, I'm blowing the whistle on the U.S. government for not telling us the truth. And I'm putting a lot of facts and data out there and so forth. So I guess, loosely speaking, I'm a nuclear physicist who said, hey, there are facts. And my rule is have facts in hand before putting mouth in gear. That's my approach to things. So I guess, loosely speaking, I'm a whistleblower. Why not?
Well, in my opinion, that's a badge of honor these days, and it should be looked at it. And definitely, it seems to have a bit of a negative connotation, which hopefully people seem to be taking back as well. And just from the way you sound, it sounds like you're doing great from last year's health scare, and it's not something I want to harp on, but it made me think about a question that you may have even asked yourself while you were recuperating. If you could give your younger self maybe a piece of advice or even some piece of information that you found out recently, what would it be?
Well, I guess that we live in a universe that are a galactic neighborhood. I don't like to talk about the universe. It's too damn big, frankly. But we've kind of recognized finally the last few years because of the Kepler satellite that the universe is very different from the way we thought it was. Now, you will find scientists saying, well, you can't get here from there. After all, the nearest place probably 1,000 light years away, and look how long it would take, and the speed of light limitations, all that sort of stuff. The reality is we now know that on the average there's between 1 and 1.6 planets per star, considering all the stars, within 100 light years of here, which is just down the street. I mean, the galaxy is 100,000 light years across. But within 100 light years of here, there are approximately 10,000 stars. Some people will say a little more, but 10,000 is a good enough number. That means about 10,000 planets. Now, if only 5% of them have civilizations, that's still an awful lot. And they're not far away. We tend to think that our situation is the norm. 100 years ago, well, there's nobody out there. If there was, we would know about it, And 50 years ago, well, there may be life out there, but again, we would know about it. we tend to think, because the nearest star to us is 4.3 light years away, so it makes you think very differently when you say, holy cow, 10,000 planets within 100 light years. Furthermore, I would tell them that what we now know is that almost all the energy in the universe is produced by nuclear fusion. We didn't even know what it was until 1938. We didn't discover the neutron until 1932. We're kind of latecomers on this cosmic awareness scale. And I mentioned fusion because I worked on a study of fusion propulsion for deep space travel in 1962, would you believe? And it's very simple. If you want to spend the dough, you can go. It won't be easy. It won't be cheap. But there are a lot of programs that weren't easy. The stealth aircraft cost $10 billion in 10 years. So the possibilities, in other words, have changed in our mind, at least. They haven't changed in the real world, but we didn't know about them.
I know deep space travel is something that you're going to be talking about at the upcoming Contact in the Desert, and just to kind of scale it back to that a little bit, just to kind of sum up a little bit what you said, I mean, to me it sounded like if you, because you've been working on this since 1961, you've seen it, if we had the money, we had all the resources, you could right now, we could, as a society, build a propulsion system that could reach another star system within our lifetime.
Oh yeah, no question about that. And look, I'm a physicist. I'm well aware that Einstein said the speed of light is the limit. But he also said something else, which we tend to forget when it isn't convenient to remember. That as time slows down, as your speed increases, time slows down. At 99.99% of the speed of light, you can go 37 light years in 6 months. Pilot time. You go out, come back, marry your granddaughter's best friend, This is real. And incidentally, the Large Hadron Collider over in Switzerland there, CERN's big device, incredibly big experimental physics device, the particles in that system go 99.9999% of the speed of light. So it's not a realm that we're unfamiliar with. And if you use the right fusion reactions, you don't need to accelerate the exhaust to close to the speed of the light. They're born with that much energy, which is kind of neat. It takes a lot less energy when they start off fast. The nuclear world is crazy. It's just like when Röntgen discovered X-rays. Great scientists in England said, that's a hoax. There is no such thing. Showed the pictures of X-rays showing your bones in your hand and stuff. It's a hoax. One of my books, it's Science Was Wrong. Top astronomer in the United States said, if there was one thing to be sure of, men would never fly any distance in a vehicle. Maybe a balloon, but not in a vehicle. That was 2 months before the Wright brothers' first flight. The British Astronomer Royal, that's a very exalted position, you understand, in 1956 said, space travel is utter bilge, he was asked by Time magazine. Nobody would pay for that. What we need is good equipment for astronomy. And a year later, Sputnik went up, and the field that's benefited the most from space travel has been astronomy, with all the telescopes that are above the atmosphere and all the equipment being put up there instead of down here. So, scientists, we're neophytes in the big picture, I think. Progress comes from doing things differently, and I'm looking forward to us living well enough so that we can keep making progress.
Since deep space travel is possible now, is it only a matter of time until it happens, or is it something that probably won't happen due to so many factors that it could influence in our way of living?
Well, a safe prediction: mankind will go to the stars if we don't destroy ourselves first.
Okay, that is a good safe prediction.
I can't say during my lifetime. I'm 81, so both my parents lived to be 90. So I got another 9 years, and we're not building a starship in the next 9 years, I don't think.
But what about in the next, let's say, 50 to 100 years?
Yeah, I certainly think so. Man has got to learn a lot of things. One of them is to start acting decently toward the rest of mankind. Nationalism is the only game in town. It seems to be, anyway. And there's no country who wants to give up its power over its own people. And, I get people saying, well, why don't they just land on the White House lawn? The president doesn't speak for 7 billion Earthlings. And there are missile sites and airplanes. It's a no-fly zone. And, how do we learn to get along with each other? That's the biggest problem we have. I'd like to see that trillion going for something more useful than weaponry. I'm not saying it isn't needed right now with the state of tension in the world. But I'm saying we're at a point in time that we've never been at before. We'll become aware that we're not the big shots in the neighborhood. We hate to admit it. And the thing is, sightings, look, the Mutual UFO Network receives approximately 1,000 sighting reports a month. And, of course, we have the counterbalancing activities of the SETI cultists, as I call them. SETI is supposed to stand for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. I say it's a silly effort to investigate. The thing is that, why do I say that? Because it assumes that we don't even look at any of the data about visitations. All we got to do is wait for signals, because surely they're going to send signals to us using technology appropriate to us. Now, we've only had long-distance radio, Marconi, 1901, so 115 years. The neighborhood's 4 or more billion years old, so that's not a big chunk of it. And why would they send us a message? And to whom? And are they using AM or FM? It's silly. And if you say I'm interested in extraterrestrial intelligence, well, let's look at the evidence. If you look at their books, you never see reference to the large-scale scientific studies about UFOs. It's like there's an unwritten rule. We don't want to talk about flying saucers. For example, Project Blue Book, Special Report 14. Biggest study ever done for the United States Air Force, Project Blue Book, way back in 1955. The work was done by Battelle Memorial Institute in Columbus, Ohio, which is a major research and development firm. Anyway, they looked at 3,201 UFO sighting reports. This is back in 1955, mind you. Now, they put out a press release. Very few copies of the report went out. And the press release somehow didn't mention who did the work, where it was done, or give you any real data from the report. But it did include a statement by the Secretary of the Air Force, Donald Quarles. He said, quote, "On the basis of this study, we believe that no objects such as those properly described as flying saucers have overflown the United States. Even the unknown 3% could have been identified as conventional phenomena or illusions if more complete observational data had been available." Well, that takes care of it. The trouble is, this press release was in the copy of the report that I happened to see at the University of California, Berkeley Library. And in this study, there's over 100 charts, tables, graphs, and maps. I was in data heaven. But he said even the unknown 3%. What? It was 21.5%.
That's a big discrepancy.
There was a quality evaluation of all the sightings. They found the better the quality, the more likely to be unexplainable. Furthermore, they had a separate category, insufficient information. If there wasn't enough data available about a sighting for the 4 scientists doing the final report evaluation to reach a conclusion, any 2 could explain it as something, aircraft, balloon, astronomical, all that sort of stuff. If there wasn't enough data, there was a separate category. Seeing that report and the lies from the Secretary of the Air Force is really what got me motivated. But I don't like being lied to, damn it.
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone does, and I think that's the biggest problem right now with the government, and not just with the UFO issue, is transparency, obviously. I mean, clearly we can see some of the data is being obscured, some of the examples that you just showed. Obviously, you've researched and you've looked at a lot of different data. Some of the UFO, how would you divide the UFO witness encounters into, like, what would the percentage be for aliens? What about interstellar travel, foreign and domestic planes, or even now drones? Like, the drones have diluted the UFO witness situation as well. I mean, how do you divide those percentages?
Yeah, they certainly have. Well, I say let's look at the old stuff. That's a good place to start, because we didn't have the drones, and there were a lot of other things we didn't have. And I think we're dealing with aliens. Now, remember, you got to ask the right question. The question isn't, are all UFOs alien spacecraft? The question is, are any?
Right.
Look, in the nuclear world, we have a lot of things that are unusual but very important. For example, uranium-235 is only 0.7% of all the uranium atoms that are around. Less than 1%. But that's the one you need if you want to have, for most systems, efficient nuclear reactions. We built a facility, this is during the Second World War, in secret, a mile-long facility, a gaseous diffusion plant, to separate uranium-235 from U-238. We were using 5% of the electrical power at use in the United States at that time. This was during the war, where electric power was precious because we had to manufacture planes and tanks and ships and all this kind of stuff, and they all use electricity. But because that's the one we wanted, it was worth the effort to get highly enriched uranium from 0.7% up to 70, 80, 90%. Now, in Canada, our reactors for power production use natural uranium and heavy water, but that's a lot of work to make, too. So what I'm saying is we're willing to spend a lot of money on keep a highly classified activity going, and we have to focus on what's relevant. It's the same with flying saucers. Yes, some of the stories are lies. Okay. Some people lie. Governments sometimes lie. Well, I'll give you an example. When it was certainly necessary. When we exploded the first A-bomb, this was in July of 1945, in New Mexico, Trinity site. It released the energy of about 16,000 tons of TNT, and it was seen from 100 miles away. And people were calling the sheriff's department. What's going on? What's happening? I mean, it wasn't released with people in any concentration. And finally, after a couple of days, the government put out a press release. An ammunition dump had blown up, and fortunately, nobody was injured. It was a total lie. But Hiroshima was bombed less than 3 weeks later, and Nagasaki a few days later. We certainly did not want to tell anybody we were going to be bombing Japan. Frankly, one of the fears was if they knew what was going to go on, they would have moved the American prisoners of war to that location. And we didn't want that to happen, to say the least. So I'm saying they lied. Okay. Sometimes you have to lie to cover up things of great importance for security. But the government has said there's nothing going on about flying saucers. There's no national security concern. But there is. And, I used to get laughs when I'd show blacked out documents because it's funny. Sources and methods, that's what it is. 98% of the document, sources and methods. That makes no sense at all, And I'm looking for a new Woodward and Bernstein. You got any takers on that?
Unfortunately not. But
Cosmic Watergate, that's what we need. Blow the lid off.
Well, it's funny that you bring up Watergate, because I know you've always compared Roswell to the cosmic Watergate, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I know that, your upcoming appearance at Contact in the Desert, one of the focuses for the convention is talking about top secret X-Files from this time frame, from 1940s to 1960s. I'm sure you review these documents. You could be our Woodward. You could be our Woodward. You could be our Bernstein. Did you find any smoking gun?
Well, I could show you 156 top secret Umbra NSA UFO documents.
You've had those for a while, though, right?
Oh, I've had them for a long time.
Yeah.
I can prove that there is a cover-up. And I have to bring up General Bolander. He was a guy, Air Force general, a good engineer, working on the Lunar Excursion module, especially in 1969, before we landed on the moon. He was working 12-hour days. I located him. We've got a copy of his memo 10 years later. He had been asked, what should we do about Project Blue Book? It's official Air Force group, and the Condon Committee, University of Colorado, had recommended that it be shut down because it wasn't contributing anything to science and security and whatever. I don't disagree with that, but anyway. So he came up with the memo, in October of 1969, which resulted in the closure of Project Blue Book. And I thought, we didn't see this for 10 years, but I ought to find this guy. And I was able to locate him. I called him and explained that I'd had a clearance for 14 years, and I was very interested in his memo. And I said, it seems to me like you're saying we have two separate communication channels here. One for things that could affect national security, because he made the flat-out statement, reports which could affect national security are made in accordance with JNAP 146, Air Force Manual 55-11, and are not part of the Blue Book system. That's an extraordinary statement, because the Air Force had been saying for years, and has been saying ever since, that there's no security concern, and Blue Book was it, and that's it. He went on to say, if we close Project Blue Book, the public won't have a place to report sightings. However, as previously noted, reports which could affect national security would continue to be investigated, using the procedures designed for that purpose. I said to him, it sounds to me like you're saying there's two separate communication channels. He said, yes. I mean, I gave him an example that somebody just told me about a saucer going down the runway at a SAC base where nuclear weapons were stored. And I said, I presume by definition that's a matter of national security. He agreed. And he agreed, two separate communication channels. So there is a cosmic Watergate.
Now, Alien, I mean, it really seems that Alien has really come into the mainstream politically and culturally. Yes. And everybody and on both sides kind of, or really they keep saying that we're being prepped for disclosure. And it's interesting that you bring up the national security part, because to me that's the biggest barrier. How can we ever topple national security to really get to this, to get to disclosure?
I think we need to decide that's what we want to do, because it's not just America. Sightings occur all over the world. Everybody has a national security consideration. The Russians don't want to put out what they've learned from crash saucers any more than we do, because it might help the other guy do something we can't. It's not an easy choice. You have to decide that's where you want to go. And I hope for my great-grandson's sake that we decide that we should ease into this. There are many implications. What about religion? And there are other people who are concerned, how do we go from a planet where nationalism is king to one where we're all earthlings, or as the science fiction writers would say, Terrans? How's that? I'm not a science fiction guy, but Terrans is a pretty good word. No, I think there are some major questions that have to be decided, and maybe being too optimistic, because I know that Hillary has been talking about it in the campaign, and John Podesta, who's running her campaign and worked for Bill Clinton, has said when he left office that the thing he most regrets is he wasn't able to get the facts out about flying saucers. And so that's a big statement.
Yeah, so to me it sounds like Hillary Clinton may get your vote. Obviously, there's other contributing factors outside of your
Canada,
vote.
I can't vote.
That's right. You live in Canada. I thought you were.
I'm a dual citizen.
Yeah, I was going to say I thought you were a dual citizen. I thought you were allowed to vote if you were a dual citizen. Maybe I was wrong there. Obviously.
Well, if from the place that I moved here from, which is in California.
Beautiful, beautiful.
There are citizenship requirements, residential requirements.
Where in California are you from? I'm actually moving to California pretty shortly.
Well, I moved here from Hayward, California, which is in the Bay Area.
Beautiful. Beautiful area.
Yes. And I lived also down in Southern California in Redondo Beach, which is lovely, too. It's kind of funny. I had a call from an old friend. I said, Stan, what are you doing back there? Don't you miss California? I said, well, I admit that the weather in California was extra special super, no question about that. And Mother Nature was generous as can be. When you look at Yosemite and the beaches and so forth, it's great. I said, and it took me a while to get used to not having earthquakes and drive-by shootings and miserable smog. But I learned to do without those things.
those little old things. No big deal, right there.
I can handle the weather here. Look, I prefer the summer here. I grew up in New Jersey. It wasn't my fault. I had nothing to do with it. But the summer, they're hot and sticky and uncomfortable. We got lovely summers and falls. They're short. 2 years ago, we had 13 feet of snow one winter.
Yeah, that I could definitely deal without, to say the least. I'll take a couple feet, and then that's as far as I'll go. That's one of the reasons why I'm going to California. I'm tired of the seasons. I just want summer all year round, pretty much.
Well, I will admit that the weather in California was great. Although when I'm going to the Contact in the Desert, and Joshua Tree is out in the desert, literally, it'll be hot. I was there last year. It gets very hot and dry. Well, Roswell gets hot too, extremely dry, and it's at 3,500 feet.
Well, let's talk about Roswell since you brought it up. And as for those who don't know, you are the original civilian investigator of Roswell. You're
right.
Also doing a panel at Contact in the Desert called "Science of UFOs and Derived Technology." Some obviously people believe that our advancement in technology post World War II started with the Roswell crash and being able to derive technology from the crash. Are you a proponent of that idea? What do you?
Not really. No. You see, I worked on the first job I had out of college, General Electric Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department. Believe it or not, I worked there from '56 to '59. It was exciting work, and in 1958, we spent $100 million. We employed 3,500 people, of whom 1,100 were engineers and scientists. So it was not a trivial program. I enjoyed doing that. But what I know is the case. The Cold War started right at the end of World War II. And anything that you could put forth that say, we'll beat the Russians, you could get money for it. So we spent huge amounts of money. So I will not give the aliens credit for all the technology that's been developed. I will give the fact that we spent huge amounts of money. And that wasn't the biggest program around, although, frankly, $100 million in 1958 was one heck of a lot of dough. You know, when you think about it. It's not 6 professors and 20 grad students. Major effort. So I don't think, we may have learned some things from, well, I'll give you an example. People say, what would you do if you had a crash saucer at Roswell? Well, I would send there were loads of small pieces. I would send them to the finest labs which had security clearances. And the first question I'd ask, I don't tell them where it came from. Let them think it came from a spy. First question is, what is this stuff? And the guy comes back to me and says, I don't know where you got this, but it's a combination of samarium and cobalt. Why would one put those two elements together? Not your problem. Send it out to other people, measure the electrical and magnetic properties of this stuff. And the guy comes back and says, well, I don't know where you got this stuff, but I measured the highest magnetic moment I've ever measured for a material. Great stuff. And pretty soon we were building ghetto blasters whose magnets used samarium cobalt magnets, believe it or not. Okay, I'm doing a study. In the 80s, I did a weekly science commentary for CBC Radio here in Fredericton, New Brunswick. And so I read widely. I could talk about anything I wanted to talk about. They were nice. An article about new and better permanent magnets, neodymium iron boron. I didn't make those up. Those are real. And at the end of the article, it said the original work on samarium cobalt was done at Wright Air Development Center, which is at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And I just laughed my head off, but I know where that idea came from. It doesn't tell you how to duplicate the saucer, but it does give you something useful. Now, there's another example of that. In my book, Flying Saucers in Science, there's a picture of me with my hand on the command module of Apollo 12. It looks to me very much like a flying saucer. It's a big, round, blunt body. But when I was growing up, I thought you want to go fast in the atmosphere, you got to be highly streamlined, like the X-15s say. Pointed nose, sharp wings, all this sort of stuff. And here's this big, blunt plane. And then I found out that Wright-Patterson had done wind tunnel tests on round things back in the 40s, late 40s. So I bet that idea might have come somebody saying, well, if these things can go this fast, which they are, why don't we take a look and see how that works out? So you can learn a lot by studying things that you didn't know how to do. And say, oh, you know, if a German plane crashed in England when they were bombing the heck out the Brits, there would be people checking out the wreckage to see what materials did they use. I wonder how they did that. You know, same thing with our planes crashing in Europe. Reverse engineering, in other words, is not a new idea by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm not saying we haven't learned anything from flying saucers. It's an exciting time to be alive. But I think the thing we need to keep in mind is, where do we want the planet to be going? Shouldn't we be taking care of the planet and the people on it?
Well, I mean, what are some of the technology that you think that we've derived from UFOs that could maybe help usher in such a thing?
Well, I think we may have learned a lot about plasma physics, for example, because we know of cases where planes were sent up with equipment to monitor a saucer flying by. So we'd get electromagnetic signature. I remember a story, a military base, the commander of the radar room comes in, and the guy who's working there says, we've got a UFO on radar over here, sitting still up there. What the heck is that? Whoops, it's gone. And the commander comes in, change frequency. They change frequency. Oh, there it is. Hey, that tells us something maybe about plasmas and ionized air around vehicles and what impact it has on being detectable on radar and a number of other things. And so, who knows what else we have learned. I think it's had a major impact, but not because somebody handed it us. Here's a transistor, guys. You might find this fun. The guys who invented the transistor, Bell Labs, were connected with Sandia Corporation, which was in New Mexico, and they might have been very well people to receive pieces of a saucer. And they make measurements. You got to send it to guys who know what to do with it and what measurements to make and have the equipment and can understand that. The time was ripe, in other words, for the transistor. I think we were heading in that direction. We might have gotten a little push, but who knows? We're spending less money on these far-out programs, but it's an exciting time to be alive because progress, as I said, comes from doing things differently, and it's exciting to see the new developments.
Technology has advanced so much, even within the last, it seems exponentially in the last 5, 7, 8 years or so, that, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine what the next 5, 7, 8 years are going to be like for us. It's definitely an exciting time to be alive, definitely one of the more fascinating times to be alive. And to connect this to what we were talking about before with the deep space program, and you were talking how you were traveling, you were working back on that as far back as 19, and you're saying that deep space travel is possible now. How close were we then to deep space travel in the 60s? And then, do you think that we've actually even, if we were pretty close now and we know how to do it now, do you think we've already done it?
Well, I don't think we've done it. There are people who say there's a whole secret space program, and we went up to the moon in 1962.
Right.
And I have seen no evidence to support that. It's an interesting story. And, it's like there are other people who say, oh, this UFO stuff, that's German technology. The Nazis developed all that. And I have to say, you're telling me Hitler was such a nice guy he wouldn't use it in warfare? I don't believe it. If Hitler developed it, he'd have used it. We developed an atomic bomb, we used it. And you can always talk pros and cons. And I'm a nuclear guy, okay? I'm not saying everything nuclear is good. I'm saying it's a lot better than the opponents give it credit for.
Well, it's like anything else. Any technology can be used for both good and bad.
That's right. That's right. And it's the people that we have to be concerned about. The thing is that technology is neither good nor bad. It's what you do with it that matters. And, we should be careful what we do with technology. But, you know, when I think of many countries now are skipping landline phones, that's a big step.
What about like companies like SpaceX that are doing commercial airspace? I mean, they have, really smart people behind this. Aren't they aware that this technology for deep space exists today? It almost seems like they're...
Well, I don't think that technology does exist, but I happen to know, I'm glad to see the private industry getting into it, mainly because I spent my working life in private industry, but I know Bob Bigelow and Bigelow Aerospace. He's a forward-looking guy. He's invested a lot of his own money. He's got these inflatable structures in space. And I think the only way we're going to move forward, it's like with computers. If the government ran the business, we'd have 4 different types. They wouldn't be very different, and they'd have 1/10 the capacity of what our present ones do. There have been companies that run the computer business that went out of business. Competition does that. You spill out the ones that can't make it. But I think that we can move forward, and that we do have to think about the consequences. And I'm sure that Elon Musk and Bob Bigelow and the other guys in the private space sector are pushing. And I don't blame them. Isn't it a shame that the only way Americans get into space today is on a Soviet rocket? That's very strange when you think about it.
Yeah, it's a reversal of history almost, in some ways.
You know, the space program, there's another part of this, too. We tend to think of us and them, you know, and you notice there's a greater homogenization, if you will, going around the world these days than there was 50 years ago. The racial segregation, I'm not saying there isn't any prejudice today and there aren't any limitations by skin color, Lord knows, but things are a lot better than they were. When I tell my kids that when I first went to the Atlanta airport and saw signs on the restrooms, white only or black only, I was shocked, and they don't believe me. I said, that's the way it was, and you didn't violate that either. You were in deep trouble. So we've come a long way, and pretty soon it's going to be, we're Earthlings. I'm an optimist. I think that.
Well, I'm glad. We need more optimists, to say the least, because I am a bit cynical. If you can't tell by our conversation, it's hard not to be these days. But I'm glad that we have someone like you who's had the type of experience that you have, and still be an optimist. I mean, that says a lot about the possibilities for us as a race, I believe.
Well, you know, people often ask me, why would aliens come here? And I try to get them to look back at the great explorers, 1600s and stuff, and think of all the reasons people travel. Why did people go to the New World after Columbus? To steal the gold, of course, to convert the souls of the heathens, to get new land, to bring back vegetables, tomatoes and tobacco, and stuff like that. There are a lot of different reasons, is the point. Now, why? I'll give you some thoughts about why would aliens come here. They're grad students doing their thesis work on the development of a primitive society. The people forget, if they ever knew, the Earth happens to be the densest planet in the solar system. And people look at me, what do you mean, Stan? A planet's a planet. No, that's not true. We have a cubic foot of Earth weighs more than a cubic foot of any of the other planets in our solar system. And you say, so what? Well, that means there are more heavy metals, and we know from our study of the stars, the spectra, the light that comes from them, we can analyze it. Heavy metals are rare in the universe. Things like osmium, rhenium, palladium, platinum, rhodium. Some of these we've heard, gold, uranium. But the point is, there's another reason I think is the primary reason for coming here. They may be mining. There are plenty of sightings of underwater UFOs coming into and going out of the water. They may be mining those diamonds that float into the ocean from Africa, or all kinds of metals at the bottom of the ocean. But I'd say the primary reason for coming here would be to quarantine us. People look at me, what do you mean? Well, if you were an alien, would you want us out there? With our track record? I don't think so. When they see how we act.
I barely want us here.
Well, 50 million people we killed in World War II.
Mm.
That's a very sad number to me, anyway. We destroyed 1,700 cities. 1,700. We firebombed the heck out of Japan. Big bombs in Europe, all over the place. 10-ton blockbusters. That was the big weapon of choice with a B-29 to deliver it. 1944. Okay, 10 tons of dynamite. One bomb. Wow. In 1945, we exploded the first A-bomb. 16,000 tons of dynamite.
Wouldn't these be the exact reasons why they wouldn't want to come?
They'd want to keep us from going out there because, you see, the first H-bomb, 1952, released the energy of 10 million tons of dynamite. And the Russians put up one later, over 50 million tons of dynamite in one stinking weapon. And I say that advisedly. Now, the point is, anybody smart knows, well, that means you've got an enormous source of energy in a small space. They could use that to come and bother us. We don't want these guys out there. That's why I say quarantine them, keep them from leaving. Well, with our track record.
I couldn't blame them, to say the least.
No. So it takes some thinking about these things to come up with ideas. And, one of my books is Science Was Wrong. 14 chapters. Kathleen Marden, Betty Hill's niece, and I, we each did 7. It's time for another one, because each chapter was stimulated by some very smart person saying something very stupid. And so there are a lot of examples of stupidity on the part of smart people, because they think they know all there is to know. Some of us know we don't, but some people are so smart they think, there's nothing more to learn. We already are there. Well, that's never been true, and you keep learning. So it's time to do a little thinking. And I think, I don't know whether you've heard the stories of the nuclear-tipped missiles, Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, for example. A bunch of Minuteman missiles with nuclear weapons. And UFOs showed up, and suddenly 10 missiles went offline, one after the other. That is supposedly impossible, but it happened. And it's happened in other places several times. Somebody's sending us a message, I think.
Taking away that aspect from it, the resources and quarantining, if they are such advanced beings, then they would be thinking about some of the larger philosophical questions that we're thinking of. Wouldn't they be searching for the same questions? Who are we? Where did we come from? And why are we here?
Yeah, and they would see enough to say, we don't want these guys joining us.
These are our incestuous third cousins that have messed everything up.
Yeah, well, it does force you to think about these things. And that's good. I want people to think about these things. It's not only that technological progress comes from doing things differently in an unpredictable way. The future's not an extrapolation of the past, technologically. But I think it's true sociologically as well. One of the reasons that some people didn't leave Germany in 1938 and 39, when the handwriting was already on the wall, was they couldn't believe that Germany, the most advanced country in Europe, American scientists flocked to Germany to go to college in the 30s, because of all kinds of smart physicists over there and people like that. But there were people who wouldn't leave because, look, this is the land of Beethoven and Goethe, and, what the stories you're telling me, I simply don't believe them. That people are being taken off the streets, the prosecution of the Jews and so forth. And then it was too late. So maybe we've made some sociological progress too, and we see the horrors man can visit upon other mankind. And that's a good thing if we recognize that we have the power to be idiots. We should not exercise that power.
Well, it's also part of the old cliche saying, but old cliches are true. With great power comes great responsibility.
Well, that's right. And it's a sobering time to be alive. On the one hand, because of all the good that change has brought, all the things we can do. Look, if I had told my grandfather that I could sit at my desk And with a relatively small device that doesn't cost a lot of money, I could communicate with more than 1 billion people instantly all over the planet. You'd have said I was crazy. But they call it the internet. You know, impossible, but it's not impossible. And I just watch in my lifetime the changes that have been made. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Some of it's good.
Some of it not so good.
That's right. Well, look, we've learned how to kill a lot of people in one shot. That's true. And that's where the balance of for good or for evil, for mankind's benefit, you know, what's driving you? What's the motivation? And these are sociological questions, not just physical questions. Again, I'm an optimist. I think we can learn from the past. And, you know, this conference, I should refer people to my website, www.stantonfriedman.com, because it lists a bunch of conferences that are coming up. Contact in the Desert is in the early part of June, but I'm doing a thing with George Noory in St. Louis, middle of June. Then there's a conference, I'll be going to Roswell. Well, I'll be going to Brantford, Ontario, a big conference, Alien Contact Expo, and we'll have a lot of discussions and panels. And then the Roswell Annual Festival last year was attended by 10,000 people. And over the year, I'm so pleased. The Roswell Museum, International UFO Museum and Research Center, last year was visited by 184,000 people. Think about that for a minute. Roswell is 200 miles from Albuquerque, 200 miles from Amarillo, 200 miles from El Paso. It's not on the way to anywhere, and yet 184,000 people came to the museum last year.
It goes to show you how much impact that the incident has had on
us
globally and internationally.
Well, these people come from all over the world. Look, I've given over 700 lectures in 50 states, 10 provinces, and 18 other countries. Only 11 hecklers, so I'm not a masochist. But people are interested. I always get asked about Roswell. What I'm saying is the interest is there. People are at a time in their lives when they're looking at the bigger picture here. It's not just how am I going to put bread on the table tomorrow, but what happens when my grandchildren or my great-grandson grows up. These are concerns that people have, and they're legitimate concerns. And I think we all should be doing what we can to give the big picture that man isn't the only intelligent critter, if you say he is intelligent. Obviously, there are some people more advanced than we are. Maybe we can learn something.
And to me, it almost seems like a mathematical improbability that we would be the only intelligent life out there. And now with all the discoveries that we're talking with the Earth-like planets and.
Oh yeah, I'm so glad about Kepler. You know that thing is so sensitive. It's the equivalent of being able to see a butterfly going in front of a car searchlight a mile away from you and see the difference in light coming from the driving lights. You know, that's remarkable. And I'm so glad that we followed up on it. And, you know, people don't realize it's only looking at a hunk of sky about the size of your fist at arm's length. We've already found well over 1,000 planets. And we have come to the conclusion that there's about at least one planet per star. That's remarkable.
Mind-blowing.
It is, because some people were saying, well, look how much energy to get here from another galaxy. I don't care about another galaxy. Look, if my wife wants a loaf of bread for dinner, I don't say, hon, I'll be back next week. I'm going out of that great bakery in Sydney, Australia. She says, the superstore is 3 miles away. We need it for dinner. So, but it is mind-blowing. It gives you an entirely different picture. Instead of us omnipotently at the top of the mountain, We're at the bottom of the mountain, and loads of us crawling around here.
As we continue to venture out into the solar system, what do you think we're finding? Do you think we're going to find evidence of panspermia? I don't even know if you're a proponent of that one. Do you think that's where we came from?
There's one thing I'll guarantee you. There will be surprises. I was talking to a man who was a scientist who was a young one at the time, and he was at a meeting where they were going over, they had just gotten data back from one of the satellites of Saturn. And he said the people were gobsmacked, as the English would say, totally shocked, because it wasn't at all what they expected to see. And no, they didn't see what they expected to see. So there will be surprises in the solar system. And I've read an interesting paper where some of the radioactivity on Mars suggests that there might have been H-bombs exploded there umpteen years ago. That's an interesting thought, because it means there was some intelligence there to create the H-bombs and to set them off.
Yes.
And I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's certainly conceivable. And the thing is that with all the planets around, and I think human level intelligence has a desire to find out more, because you have to expect the unexpected. You know, what could happen here? Terrible things could happen, so you need to find another place to go to. Or a supernova explodes and you're practically wiped out, except for the guys who were down in the mines when it happened. You know? So we need to be ready. You got to have that storm shelter, in other words. And in the Midwest, there are places where people have their tornado shelters. When the alarm goes off, get the heck where it's safe, because your house may disappear very quickly when the tornado comes along. So I think there are other intelligences. I think they don't want us to take our brand of friendship out there. I think that it's an exciting time for young people to be alive, to think of the new discoveries that will be made, not just in technology, but maybe in sociology. That's what I hope for.
Stanton, I really can't thank you enough for coming on The Mind's Eye tonight. Enlightening, as always.
Well, good. I appreciated it. I love being on a soapbox, you know.
Well, we need more like you to come out there and start screaming. Give out your social media information one last time before I kick you off.
Okay. Anybody who wants to get my books, and they get an autograph with every book they buy, it's www.stantonfriedman.com. And you can use PayPal. It's easy. I autograph all the books I send out. That's the bonus you get. Amazon doesn't have books with my autograph.
Well, if they do, it's fake, so probably don't want to purchase it there.
Well, and my website tells you how to reach me, too. I don't like to give out my telephone numbers on the phone, on the radio.
Yeah.
But it's been a pleasure to be on with you, and I hope we can do it again.
Oh, definitely. And I'll tell you to have fun at Contact in the Desert, but I don't think that's going to be an issue for you for some reason.
I'll be busy, I'll tell you that.
Well, you got a lot of great stuff planned, and I look forward to our next conversation. I really appreciate giving us a slice of your time.
It'll be fun. Thanks much.
Mind's Eye Show wrap up after this. We definitely highly recommend seeing Stanton in person, and there's no better place to do it than Contact in the Desert 2016. You can also catch some of our past guests, Robert Bovall, or even Nick Redford. There really is a truly unbelievable lineup this year. Some other greats include George Norrie, David Wilcox, Jim Mars, Travis Walton, Mike Barrett, and that's just really off the top of my head. More info now at contactinthedesert.com. But one thing that you may not know is that you're going to have a chance to meet none other than me, Brian Turnoff, the host of The Mind's Eye. I'll be in attendance working the press box, rubbing elbows with your favorites in the alien and UFO community. Not only that, The Mind's Eye will be posting all weekend like we do at every conference that we attend. June 3rd to June 6th, we'll be giving you a digital backstage pass to this amazing conference. All you got to do is follow us now on our social media pages, facebook.com/Mind's Eye Show, and the same for Twitter. at Mind's Eye Show. And as you've probably put this together over the past few episodes, the Mind's Eye has and is moving to the sunny state of California. So that means we'll be actually going dark for the next 6 to 8 weeks as we make this transition. So please bear with us. Don't worry, because everything else will still be up and running. Blogs, daily news, updates, contests, the whole shebang as usual. All you have to do is go to our website, themindseyemedia.com, or follow us on social media, facebook.com/Mind's Eye Show and Twitter @Mind's Eye Show. We'll be back sooner than you think. Big thanks and tip of the hat to you, the listener. This is Brian Turnoff signing off for the Mind's Eye.